This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to our podcast. Tommy, what do we got?
Well, today we're going to be looking at some of the unsolved mysteries that people are still trying to figure out what happened. Some of them actually have been solved, so I guess they're not unsolved anymore. But we're looking at some of the unsolved mysteries from the Second World War, from World War II.
Yep. Wasn't there a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries of World War II at one point?
I'm sure there might have been. I know there's unsolved mysteries, right?
Yeah.
So today we're looking at just ones that happened during World War II, so basically 1939 to 1945.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that there's been movies made about some of these that we'll be talking about. There's obviously video games based off a lot of these. A lot of them are strictly myths. A lot of them are just like someone found something somewhere, like found a document somewhere. And, what does this document pertain to? And it goes from there. Some of them they know are true, as far as like they're able to prove that there's some sort of mystery there. They're still trying to figure out. A lot of them are missing people that just kind of disappeared, right? Or what really happened to these people who betrayed certain individuals. It's a big one on here. So it's just a lot of stuff. There's just a lot of stuff. Like really, a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, me too. When I started doing
this research, and there was constant. At all the websites and all the books that I found had different ones. Like these are the top 25. These are the top 30, and they literally there wasn't a lot of repeat. So there's a lot of stuff on here. There's no way we're going to get to them all in what we talk about today, but there's a ton there.
We're not going to go in too much depth about each one of these, but we're going to basically create some form of like a survey as to what happened and what are some of these unsolved ones.
There's a couple that people really want. They want to, know more about. We'll take it.
Yeah, you could always Google it.
Yeah.
Oh, we could make another podcast just on that.
Make a podcast just on one of those. Yeah. Who knows?
All right. So I have a cold today, so like my nose is completely stuffy. So I'm talking with my nose.
Toughing it out, Pete.
I'm going to tough it out for this podcast. I got this. All right, so let's get started. I want to start with the Battle of Los Angeles, which I thought was kind of interesting. This is February 25th, 1942, so it's only a couple months after Pearl Harbor. So you could kind of see why people specifically in the Pacific in California would be a little weary as to, like, are the Japanese going to attack this coast as well? Well, in February 25th, 1942, what essentially happens is military personnel as well as civilians start seeing something in the sky, basically, like almost they think it's like an airstrike coming towards them off the coast. And there's multiple sightings of this. So the entire night just lights up with searchlights that sweep across the sky, and people are basically hear the sirens. People are hiding. They're going and blacking out their homes. And there's really a fear like there's something, an airstrike of some kind coming from the Japanese forces. And then the fears actually they get confirmed because you hear anti-aircraft guns start going off at like 3 a.m. in Santa Monica. So you're actually hearing guns going off. So there is definitely the potential of, oh no, we are being bombed by the Japanese. Troops were ordered to fire basically at this floating objects in the sky. They call it the Battle of Los Angeles because 5 people actually died as a result of this. But the 3 other people died from car accidents and 2 additional people died from having a heart attack.
Yeah, because the nerves are so much. And like you said, they fired 1,400 artillery shells. Then they never found if they hit anything or not. But if something was up there, it was probably hit. But they fired so many things at it. But people were just flipping out. It's almost kind of like a World of Worlds, right? They get all nervous.
Yep.
Whether or not there was something wasn't sure if it was like a Japanese plane, or a lot of people later on say no, it must had to be a UFO or something like that. But I know in
still not explained.
It's still not explained. In 49, they said it was a weather balloon.
Yep.
And then in 1983, the Navy said it was just war nerves. Because like you said, it was just a few months after Pearl Harbor. They were just worried about something happening, and that's really what it was. That's what the Navy officially says it was. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But
and I think it's interesting how they always try to like say, "Oh, that's just a weather balloon."
that does pop up a lot of these. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And it's interesting because you were saying how many different things they fired. Actually, they damaged buildings because some of the artillery shells did not detonate in the air. So they just literally fell down and they detonated on buildings in LA. So it's kind of crazy. So unexplained to this day. We don't really know what happened with the Battle of LA. What do you got? What's another one you got?
Like I said, there's so many out there. One that I saw was the swastika in the trees.
That one
I
was
did. I
cool.
didn't see
Well,
this.
okay, not cool, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was basically it was discovered actually what in '92, right? By
Yep.
intern for a landscaping company. He was approached his boss with a photograph from Brandenburg, and he'd been working on these basically searching aerial photos for irrigation lines and wooden areas, where he discovered basically in this densely wooded pine forest a group of about 140 lurch trees, and they were colored. They changed color in the autumn, so their needles fell off. And in the summer, they were in this. You couldn't tell; they looked just like normal pines, unless you like kind of like
Yep.
good at
And
this.
you need an
But what
aerial
they
shot to see it,
you need an aerial
obviously.
shot to see it. But basically, he noticed they were planting a pattern which could only be visible for a few weeks every year from the air, and the pattern was a swastika. And the
Yep.
size of the tree said that they had been there for some time. Like these were not like small trees. So these trees,
1930s. They dated them back to
yeah. So they
1930s.
so obviously dates back to 1930s. So for 60 years, this vivid yellow swastika appeared every autumn, all right, in Germany, undetected throughout the Soviet
Yep.
occupation, throughout the domination of, the East German government, the communist East German government during the Cold War. And the question was, why were they planted and by who? And they're still trying to figure that out. So the news have kind of spread and arose over the plantings throughout Germany. And yeah, so it's like who did this? Like why was it there? And it was a complete farce of this. And they actually found this in other places too, that they found these large swastika trees, basically, planted in these swastikas all throughout parts of Germany.
Crazy. It's crazy
So
that no one noticed it for so long. You know what I mean?
yeah, again, if
Especially
you
when it
weren't
was
flying,
like East Germany at the time.
if
You
you
know, the
weren't going from the
Soviets were.
sky, if you didn't know
Yeah.
what to look for, and if you weren't, it would only be during that time of year too. And they
Yep.
said they're pretty much at random locations. Like there's no real reason why they're there. So
Nuts.
I don't know. It's just
Well,
one of those
someone was
like
a
those
little
freaky
fanatic
things.
there. I mean, to say the
Well,
least.
it's Nazi Germany. There's going to be fanatics.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
kind of like the definition of what they are.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. The Lady Be Good crew. So this is it was a 1943 disappearance of a B-24D Liberator aircraft. The name of the aircraft was Lady Be Good, and it had a 9-man crew on board, and they were coming back from a Libyan airfield. It was April 5th, 1943, but it never actually made it, and its entire crew was presumed lost. Apparently in the Mediterranean Sea, that was the idea. Well, 15 years later, the mystery supposedly is solved, but the exact details of the story kind of remain obscure to this day. So, scouts for an engineering company cite the plane's wreckage in May 1948 in a desert far south of the coastal airfield. Though no remains were found on the plane, but it still had fresh water and a working radio. So it's like, why would they abandon that, right? Then later evidence found in the 60s actually found some remains of these men, and they showed that the crew had parachuted out of the plane about 16 miles before the plane crash landed. So they're like, why would they parachute 16 miles? And how would the plane go by itself for 60 miles? Then the idea is like, well, maybe they actually didn't parachute out. Maybe they got just lost over this, desert, and this plane ran out of fuel and they simply just kept on walking. But even the fact that they walked, some of the remains were found hundreds of miles away from this wreckage, including one of the remains had like a heartbreaking diary that was recovered. It was of one particular second lieutenant, and to this day, we don't really know how they managed to get as far as they did before collapsing and what actually happened to that plane. So the plane is found, the men are found spread out over hundreds of miles, and no one knows how they got there to this day. There's a lot of these, actually. You notice a lot of them deal with planes.
Oh yeah, well there were so many planes going on. Actually, so not really one. Well, one I did see popping up a lot is the idea of Foo Fighters, right? Not the
Yep.
band, but that's basically what they were called UFOs back then, right? Foo
Yep.
Fighters, and you see a lot of those. Yeah, they're popping up, and then planes disappear shortly after, being exposed to a Foo Fighter. You got to understand too, it's World War II. There were a lot of new weapons, so a lot of these Foo Fighters could have been like the Messerschmitt, right, and stuff like that. The Comet, those different things, those different jet and rocket powered planes that the Germans come out, especially later on in the war. But it's also they're experimenting with new things, and it's also who knows what else is flying around up there.
Yep.
So that was something that you see a lot, and a lot of these planes just disappear because really a lot of it's probably can be attributed to probably pilot error, right? Weather
Mm.
conditions, flying off course, especially if you're flying over like water. It's kind of hard to find your marker sometimes. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of these just planes that disappear. One of the ones that I saw though that I thought was interesting, I never heard of this before actually, was there was a list of 17 British soldiers that were discovered at Auschwitz.
I saw that. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a list that contains the names of 17 British soldiers, and the list was found during excavations actually in 2009. So pretty recently is when this took place, 6 decades after the war ended.
They don't
Question
know
really
why they were
became,
there, right?
yeah, who were these soldiers on the list? if it was unclear if they were former prisoners of war, if they were, a lot of people thought they were maybe defectors to the
Yep.
SS.
Yep.
Which they had different surnames like Gardner, Lawrence, Osborne, and 8 of the names had like these little like tick marks next to it. So I'm not sure like what that meant. But a lot of them feel like they were, it was indicated that they were executed along with other British soldiers. Others don't agree with that. But it contained a lot of German words next to them too, such as never, now, and since then. So there's a lot of people start believing these soldiers were members of a British SS division that the Nazis actually started during the war, and if they never be able to prove like a definitive answer, but the list was secretly hidden away after this. So a lot of people suggest it wasn't. I mean, it was hidden away. So a lot of people said it probably wasn't meant to be found. Like probably very quickly they hid it. But yeah, the big theory that I always saw with this, I did a little more research on, is that it was probably possibly a British like double spy. They were spies for the Nazis, a British
Hmm.
SS unit, and then they probably got caught, or they were turned to be double spies. They were helping the British, and they got caught, and then that's what happened. And
And they shipped them
were
to Auschwitz.
they were
Hmm.
shipped into Auschwitz as kind of like punishment for doing what they did, for betraying.
Nuts. This one, and it's funny because I keep on going back to planes. I feel like, but did you see the one about Pearl Harbor's ghost plane?
The ghost for them, yeah, the
Yeah,
pilotless
yeah,
plane.
yeah.
That's what they call
Pilot.
it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So it shouldn't be called a ghost plane, but it should be ghost pilot. But so this happens on December 8th.
It was a year after Pearl Harbor. This
Oh,
happened in
it was
1940.
42.
Yeah, it was 42. Yes.
A naval radar spots a single plane that's on course from Japan. So everyone kind of quickly scrambles, right, to actually scramble two planes to intercept this newcomer.
Another
So
wave,
these
yeah.
two Navy pilots, right, report seeing a P-40 fighter, an American craft, that's basically destroyed, riddled with bullet holes, ruined landing gear. And they see the pilot inside, and he's waving at them, but he's covered in fresh blood. So they wave back at this pilot, and the plane passes them, and it winds up crashing on land very soon thereafter. So the Navy and everybody else rushes in to inspect the wreckage, and there was absolutely no evidence of the pilot. So they had no idea where the plane came from, who the pilot was, and most importantly, they don't know what happened to this pilot. Some people later claimed that this was a fictional account, but the two pilots that were there that saw this plane, that went to intercept this plane, and clearly whoever saw it on radar, right? Why would they be up there? Said no, that was definitely a pilot. You just don't know what happened to him.
And they're saying what's going on here, and that's why a lot of them saying, how did this person manage to like survive wherever he
That
did
makes
for a
sense.
year
Oh
and
yeah,
then
that is kind of
fly?
freaky, right?
Yeah, so that because like you said, it was a diary inside the plane that claimed the plane had flown from Meteoro Island, which is actually 1,300 miles away in the Pacific. So the mystery was like, how did this pilot crash on land after the Pearl Harbor? Like, did he crash there and then somehow got back? Right? Did he
Instead of
fix his
1 year, how would that
plane?
happen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he survived on the
weird.
island, fixed the plane, flew back. Like it doesn't make any sense. And
No,
so it was one of those things that's unanswered. A lot of people say, like you said, it was maybe fictional, maybe it didn't happen at all. Maybe the pilots are just seeing things, but
crazy.
that was a freaky one. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
because they said they saw the guy and they suddenly didn't.
Do you see the one about the German forces having like an Arctic outpost?
The North Pole outpost.
Yeah, like they called it the treasure hunter. It was like 620 miles from the North Pole. And what's really fishy about this one is because it was apparently strategically situated where it was near the North Pole and like this little island to interfere with Allied transports that move troops and supplies through the Arctic. But Nazis justified it as basically a valuable weather station to collect weather data. But it's abandoned in 1944, apparently because the Germans that were stationed there wound up eating raw polar bear meat. I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah, with
And they all got
ringworms.
sick. Yep. So a U boat came in and got them out of there. However, what's interesting is that the whole time we were there to collect data on weather. But when they left, that's when the weather was the most important for them because they needed to know the weather in Soviet Russia while they were attacking. So they're like, well, why would you leave during an offensive where you actually really need to know the weather? So then people started thinking, like, well, why else would they be there? Some people say that Nazis were obsessed with obviously the occult and, things out of this world, some mystical Nordic past that try to
Yeah, yeah,
legitimize the regime. To
trying to
this
prove
day,
that Aaron superiority, right? That's
yep,
one of the things that they're trying to do. And yeah, so it kind of goes. I mean, I'm not trying to throw my Marvel affection in here,
you
right?
should
But
throw
if
your
you ever
Marvel affection.
see like the first Captain America movie, that's what they're kind of doing, right? They're looking for Norse mythology, or they're talking about it when they're looking for the cosmic cube. That's the thing that Red Skull and the Nazis are looking for. So I mean, it ties in with that, right? It kind of
Yep.
ties into the idea that they're trying to look for these artifacts. I don't know if they're trying to look for ones that have like magic powers, but also trying to look for ones that can kind of prove that they're racial superiority. That's something else that they're looking at.
Yeah, it was kind of fishy how why the Nazis would have like a North Pole solar
Well,
base or
they
secret base.
also maybe they're trying to see if they're on Santa's naughty or nice list. I don't know. But there's also
I
that's
think
a
we can
dad
answer
joke
that
right there.
question.
I saw that the papers, the documents, because of the cold, were like perfectly preserved when the Soviets went there in like the 90s or not in the 80s, I think, right, or something like that.
Yep.
They actually went to this base. So let's see what the Nazis were doing here, and they're like, well, all these documents are still like perfectly preserved. That's where they find some of it, but again, they're not really sure exactly why the Germans were there. They weren't just there for weather. There was other ways they could get the weather
Yeah.
by then having to be there.
Yep.
So.
There's a lot of golden treasure. You want to get to a couple of these
Yeah,
golden
so one of
treasure?
them I thought was really interesting was popped up a couple times was the Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's hidden treasure.
Mm-hmm.
You probably saw this. So a lot of this treasures from the World War II, some of it has been found. A lot of it hasn't. I remember the Nazis when they take over countries, they just pillaged it and took a lot of the gold, silver, not just that stuff, but also just like the artwork. So Rommel's a high-profile general. He was dedicated to the Nazi state, and he was worried that a lot of the treasures would be lost. So he was alleged to have given four special SS divers, right, large
Mm-hmm.
steel ammunition crates that contain all of these German treasures, jewels, gems, artwork, gold, and it was included about 4,401 pounds of gold. And he took them to be buried somewhere under the sea. No one knows the exact whereabouts. Some people think it could be somewhere off of Corsica's eastern coast, um, but they believe it's probably worth over 20 million British pounds, and they know
Wow.
it exists because they claim they discovered a photo um, of a German soldier with his parents kind of had a coat on the back, and they think that might lead him to the treasure. But they also hear a lot of like people talking about it too. It's something that a lot of the, particularly if they served with Rommel, they kind of knew about this treasure, but no one knows exactly where it could be.
Hmm. Interesting, because when I was doing
But
like I actually started same thing as you. Like, there's so much about this stuff. Once I got into the Nazi train, gold train, which we'll get into in a second,
yeah,
you start realizing there's so many different high-ranking officials that supposedly hid the treasure. One of them was in Japan. This is the first time I saw this when I started researching it. It was a World War II Japanese general, Tamayoki Yamashita, and apparently he buried treasure somewhere in the Philippines while the Japanese were occupying the Philippines. And then he's eventually executed by American forces in 1946. And from that point forward, any like hope of trying to figure out what his treasure obviously is buried, no one knows. But and even to this day, people don't really know if the treasure is real. However, many people since 40s started searching for Yamashita's gold in the Philippines, and apparently, there was one guy in 1988. Actually, there was a court case that was brought against the former Philippines president, Ferdinand Marcos, by one Rogelio Roxas. Roxas claimed that he found part of this treasure that was buried in World War II. The president kind of promptly swooped in and seized a portion of that treasure and stole it. So the court finds it in the favor actually of Roxas and says, no, you're right, you did find some treasure. And in 1996, he gets the money back that he found. Also, interestingly enough, when the treasure is given back to him, it's actually given back to his family in 96 because the Roxas guy died in 1993, and people believe that he might have been killed by the government in the Philippines because he really was or had discovered this treasure that the government took all for themselves.
and like you said, it's a ton of these Nazi gold stories out there. I mean, there's movies about this too. Indiana Jones isn't that kind of dealing with some of
Yep,
this stuff too?
yep, yep.
You're the Indiana Jones guy, so stuff like that.
So are you. We're both Indiana Jones. How can you not be an Indiana Jones guy? Come on.
Because he hides in a fridge from a nuclear blast. That's why.
All right, listen. That one doesn't count. That one's that one was this is a new generation Indiana
And
Jones.
we'll see what happens.
So let's talk about the Nazi gold train, because this was I feel like the granddaddy of all the Nazi treasures.
The treasures, yeah, because you're still these people are people are looking for all these treasures too.
Actively,
Let's talk about
governments
that.
are
Like
looking for these.
governments,
Yeah,
they're looking for this stuff. They are literally looking for it. They are spending money. There are private companies, governments. They are trying to find this treasure. So people believe it. Like
yep.
they know like the treasure did exist. What happened to it? That's what they're trying to find.
Well, the Nazi gold train, it's almost become a legend, obviously, but
Oh
it was
yeah.
loaded with Russian and Polish art, currency, just gold. Period. On this train, and it's supposed that the train was actually concealed in this like underground complex that was built by forced labor, obviously, right? POWs. According to some witnesses, this train also like contained some form of operational prototypes of weapons that were It's supposed to save Germany in the last months of the war. Anyway, the train is concealed by the retreating Germans, and apparently it's concealed in this tunnel that comes under Soviet control and eventually becomes Poland at the end of World War II. So for years, actually to this day, Polish scientists, historians try to locate this thing like in vain. And allegedly, they were able to scan the ground and they were able to find a train near a Polish city of Wałbrzych, which used to be a German city. Supposedly, there's like 300 tons of gold and weapons on this train, right? So the Polish government sponsors the search because of these scientists that are like, yeah, we found it. And then they pay for this expeditions, and the Poles have keep on conducting this. In 2016, they even hire a German mining company that says that they also identified a train in the same spot. But to this day, well, they have not found, or perhaps they have. There's somebody else now that said, I just saw this in the news, that said that I know exactly where the train is, but unless I'm allowed to keep the loot, I'm not telling anybody where it is.
Yeah, I've seen that one too. And they actually made a lot of these like partially completed tunnels, I believe too, like these unfinished tunnels in something called Project Rise, which is basically a kind of this coding for the construction project of this. It consists of a bunch of these underground tunnels. That's why the Owl Mountains. I guess
Yep.
that's someplace right by in Poland. You would know more
Yep.
than I do about that. But yeah, they believe that these things were they know some of them exist, and they believe there's other ones in there too. And that's where some of these trains could be, have like artwork. And they actually did find some artwork that they believe was originally in this train, but somewhere else now. Bunch of artwork found behind a 16th century wall paintings hidden behind plaster walls while doing renovation work in an old palace
Hmm.
near Struga. Did I say that correctly? The village of Struga.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So
Did you
sorry,
notice that
my Polish isn't as polished as yours, but
well, you
there's
have
a
Polish. But
there we
what's
go.
interesting here, just looking at this Nazi gold train thing, is that there's supposedly witnesses that saw this train being loaded. Um, so there is some credibility to the fact that this train does exist. It just disappeared. No one knows where it went, but apparently, it was or it did exist at some point or another. And another thing that's like gone, and this one kind of comes up a lot as well. I'm sure you saw this. The Amber
The
Room. That's what
Russian
it was.
Amber Room, right?
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. So it was an actual room, right, inside the Catherine House. It was a royal palace in Russia. Previous to that, it was the St. Petersburg Winter House, and before that, it was Prussia's palace. So it was a gift from the Prussian king to Frederick William, rather Prussian King Frederick William the First to Peter the Great in 1716, and then what ultimately I mean it's in the name. Amber Room was constructed out of tons of amber panels that were backed with gold. Apparently, this thing's worth millions, if not billions of dollars. Um, and the later renovations kind of made it even more wealthy than it really is. And there's images of this, so like we kind of see it. Plus, we could see it now because the
Yeah.
Russians rebuild it, right? But in Nazi Germany invades Russia, and then 1941, this chamber disappears, basically, right?
Well, they said they
So
think the Germans were the Russians tried to like hide it right underneath like wallpaper and
that's
stuff,
what they did, and the
but like
Germans found it.
The Germans, yeah, they found it pretty easily.
Yeah, no. Apparently, they're like this. Yeah, disassembled the. Then they disassembled the room and they brought it to like a
They took it
castle in
apart, yeah.
Germany because they wanted to display it. And then all of a sudden, this castle supposedly gets bombed by the Allies, but we still don't know whether it was destroyed in that castle because supposedly someone actually took it apart again and they were moving it. So there's some opinions that maybe it's at the bottom of the Baltic Sea because the steamer that was carrying it sank in like 1945. But then like one panel of it came out, like a private collector had it in 1990, I think. Did you see that? And that's when they
Yeah.
were like, that means that someone definitely jacked this thing at the end of the war, and it does exist somewhere. But we only knew of the one panel.
Well, there
The
is a
Rush,
miniature Amber Room, right? There's like a
yep,
miniature one on display in Berlin. So they
yep.
have there, and they have a replica. There is a replica
The
one
real one is
in
in Russia.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't really know what the room is. They apparently was put back into crates and it disappeared. We don't know where it is, and it's worth like billions of dollars. But the Russians essentially built their own Amber Room. They recreated it. It took them 24 years to complete it. It was finally completed in 2003. And they build it obviously back in St. Petersburg, which they say it really is the rightful and proper home for it. But the original, gone. No one knows. And the fact that it like came up on an auction, a piece of it, a panel, someone stole that thing. You know,
Yeah, they
however
stole it.
many
They were able to
crates.
get it and
Yeah,
found it at some point. Oh, it's probably in some like rich billionaire's
yeah. Some
basement
dude's got
somewhere.
it.
Yeah.
Some dude's got
Yeah,
it.
a lot of this missing treasure or missing things, that's probably where they are. Like you see the one about Hitler's globe. There was something about Hitler's globe that kept on
Yeah,
popping up.
apparently, you're like, well, that was made popular by Charlie Chaplin, right? Because he had this
Charlie
humongous
Chaplin,
globe in
yeah.
the movie. But that was real. So Hitler had this humongous globe. Supposedly, we knew exactly where it was. And by the time that the U.S. forces got into that area, the globe went missing, and they don't know what happened to the globe.
Yeah, someone took it and they have it in like the private
Yeah.
collection somewhere.
Well, that's like
That's just
Hitler
kind of what
paintings. I mean,
happens with a lot of these.
there's people that buy Hitler's paintings. I feel like we talked about that when we did the Hitler, that last days of Hitler. But when I tell my students, they're like, "Really? Like, there's actually paintings of Hitler?" I'm like, "Yeah. If you Google it, you could actually see Hitler's paintings. Like, it's kind of eerie almost. By almost, I mean it's eerie and weird. But
Well,
all right,
people like those like macabre type of things, I guess.
yeah, I guess right. Hermann Goering, he died from
Okay, yeah.
cyanide. Do you see that one?
Yeah, but the question is, they know he died from cyanide. The question is how he got the cyanide,
Yeah, because he was already in a United
right?
States prison.
He was
So he's the
in
Nazi
prison, yes.
Party leader of Luftwaffe, Hermann Goering. He's like the one of the top Nazis,
If you ever watch the old footage, he's like the fat Nazi. You'll see him all the time. Like that's how you can probably make him out.
and he was kind of very like, "Well, I was just a soldier," and they're like, "No, dude, you were a high-ranking person given the actual orders." Requested to be shot by firing squad instead of being hanged, and they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to kill you exactly how you don't want to be killed." So they were going to hang him. And then the night before, he commits suicide with a cyanide capsule. And then they're like, how did this capsule get in there? There's some information here because apparently in 2005, there was a former U.S. military policeman that was actually the guard to Goering. And he claimed that he smuggled the poison in and apparently smuggled it in a fountain pen because he received it from some girl he had met that like became his girlfriend overnight. And this girl said, "Listen, you need to bring this. There's a pill inside this pen, and it's medicine that Goering really needs." Um, so he's like, "All right, fine. I guess he was in love with this girl." But he brings the pen. Obviously, inside it's the cyanide capsule. He kills himself, but this girl is never seen again. So to the U.S. military policeman said he never saw her again. Again, we don't know
Yeah,
if
and a
that's the
lot
true
of
story or not.
you don't know if he's telling the truth. Yeah, a lot of historians dismiss that.
Yep.
But being they said like the army did kind of investigate it, but they kind of were like, you know what, he's dead. We don't really care.
Yep.
Like as
That's the
long as
thing.
he
They were
was
like,
dead, they didn't
"Yeah,
really
as long
care.
as he's dead, he's dead." Right.
Yeah, like all right, he kind of escaped justice or whatever they want to call it, their punishment, but he was dead, so they really didn't care as much. It was kind of like on to the next guy. There were so many other ones that were being,
We'll talk about
this
German
is going
people.
through with Nuremberg trials. Yeah.
Yeah. How about Rudolf Hess flying to Scotland thinking like he was going to be a savior? That was odd, right?
Yes. Yeah. Why he went
Rudolf
to
Hess,
Scotland? Yeah.
deputy Fuhrer, when Hitler received his appointment as Reich Chancellor, this guy's like a top Nazi. And essentially, what he does is he steals a plane, right, in like a single seater plane in May 1941, flies this Messerschmitt to the UK, bails out over Scotland. He lands, and then on some dude's farm. And he says he's somebody else, and dude's like, "Yeah, no, you have an accent. You're definitely not a British dude." Plus, you just kind of jumped out of a German plane. So he is arrested. And apparently, he came to Scotland or to England to negotiate, right? A separate peace with the British. And he thought they were going to, like, bring him in and treat him well. However, they basically said, "Oh, we have a top Nazi here. Great." And they threw him in jail. And he was, like, surprised by this, that he was imprisoned. And then he was briefly held in the Tower of London. I saw that. They didn't really charge him with any crime, but apparently he kind of went crazy based on what I saw. He tried to
Well,
commit
yeah, but they
suicide
think he might have. Yeah, they think he might have been pretending to have amnesia or other mental disorders, and he was basically held there for. Well, he was
to
eventually
the
sentenced
80s.
to life imprisonment. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
to 1987 when he killed himself. He committed suicide at the age of 93. But a lot of people, his lawyer said he was too frail to commit suicide, so
I
they
saw
think that
that.
maybe someone killed him. But the real question was why he decided to fly to Scotland, and it was a
Yep.
lot of people that were with. A lot of people think he was trying to negotiate a peace with the British because he wanted to avoid a two-front war. What was going on? He remained in custody for 4 decades, and really, there's no real answer, or forthcoming answer on why he went there. There was a lot of conspiracies that he thought maybe, or maybe there was someone that told him in the royal family, right? Come here, we can negotiate something, because there's always the rumors that there were some Nazi sympathizers and stuff like that in those areas.
That's, I think, one of the biggest mysteries of World War II is how did all these Nazis escape? You know, and a lot of them
Well, they
escaped
had
to
to have help.
Argentina.
Yeah,
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 did you see the one that like the U boat and they're like, okay, this U boat's fishy. Where was it? It probably had Hitler. The U-530.
yeah. U-530. That's the one that I saw popping up quite a bit. Yeah, what was in it?
Yeah,
They think, or Hitler or someone major.
someone big, someone big. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
they went to
So it was Grand.
Argentina 2 months after the war. Yeah,
Yep. So there's a lot of fishy things with this one, right? So basically, Germany surrenders to the Allies in May 1945, right? And this Admiral Donitz served as the head of the Navy as well as the head of state, right? And right president ordered the entire U-boat fleet to surrender immediately to Allied ships. Now U-530 was at sea, so it received the message they were supposed to surrender right away, but they kind of disappear for 2 months. And then on July 10th, 1945, this U-530 arrives at Mar del Plata in Argentina. The commander surrendered his command to the Argentine Navy. But what's interesting is that normally the voyage, regardless where they were in Europe, it would have normally taken 2 weeks, but they were gone for 2 months. So they're like, all right, what's the delay? Like, where were you? And also the fact that they surrendered at this particular port as opposed to the port that all other U-boats surrendered at, that was also fishy. What else was there? There was a couple of things, right? That were kind of out here.
well, there was no info given, right? All of the IDs were destroyed.
Yep.
It said they were transporting Nazis, like they knew
Yep.
that's what was happening. But all those documents that talked about that were also destroyed. So there was no passenger log, and everyone on it were basically not saying anything. So there was like, why did it go to this port? Why is there no? All of the ships had like a manifesto, listing where they were all this time, the names of everybody on board. This boat did not have any of that, and they're like,
Yep.
that's not how these things are run. That's not how the military, particularly the Nazi military, ran at the time. So
Yep.
when you were just gone for 2 months, what were you doing that 2 months? They were just like, we were at sea. Like, no, you weren't. Like, that's not how it works,
And you see the Argentine reporter that apparently wrote for Buenos Aires shortly thereafter? There was a reporter that saw the boat dock, and he says that there was a man that disembarked that was dressed like a high-ranking officer, or at least a civilian. It was someone that got off that boat that everyone was kind of looking up to. And obviously, that kind of fuels some rumors that it might have been Adolf Hitler, but that's kind of the premise of that show, right? Hunting Hitler.
Hunting Hitler, all the time finding Hitler shows. We've talked about if he escaped or
Yeah.
not. You gotta remember he was in bad health anyway. I mean, that
Yeah.
wasn't
No, I
fake.
doubt this was
So even if
Hitler.
he,
It might have been somebody else, but
like,
well, that's why
it could have
they
been
don't know
someone
what
else. There
happened to Mueller.
definitely,
Heinrich
yeah,
Mueller,
they
right? No one ever found him.
yeah,
That's one of those mysteries of World War II.
yeah. All these Nazis escaped, like you said. Yeah,
Yeah. So Heinrich Mueller, based on what I was looking at it, again, one of the top Nazis. He was the head of the Gestapo, so the secret police. And the last time he's seen is in Hitler's bunker, like on the evening of May 1st, 1945, right? So he spoke with Hitler's former pilot of his intention not to be taken by the Russians. He's like, I'm not going to be taken. And then he just disappears. No one really knows what happened. He's now found amongst the numerous bodies found in the bunker. He was also so known, as the head of the Gestapo, Mueller, that people knew what he looked like. So there's a lot of conspiracy buffs are like, all right, if he died in this assault in Berlin, where's his body? Like, why was it never found or identified? They think that's kind of interesting. And, again, potentially maybe he was on that boat, or for all we know, and if not, he might have been on another boat because they never found him. There's no proof whatsoever that the head of the Gestapo ever died or what may have happened to him.
yeah. There's a couple that say he might be buried in a mass grave, actually in a Jewish cemetery, believe it or not, because there was a
Interesting.
guard who said he burned a body that matched the description of Muller's face that he died in Berlin, with the bombings and stuff like that. But there's no way to actually know that for a fact. And they said if there was a chance of getting DNA, they wouldn't be able to get DNA from a mass grave. Too much contamination, stuff like that.
Yeah,
So there's all rumors that he was spotted in Cuba or Argentina, but no one's ever been able to prove anything. So
crazy.
he's dead now. They just don't know where he is.
And Argentina had a lot of like little German villages, especially in the 40s and 50s. So, I mean, it's possible he might have hit there. We don't know.
It's
Hence,
one of those things.
it's on this podcast.
Well, let's just, I guess should be coming to an end a little bit, but one I saw
Yep.
did pop up on all of them. A lot of times one of the number ones, which again, this story itself could be a podcast, but was the who betrayed Anne Frank.
Yep, I saw that one.
And this is one that actually has a little bit more. You heard a bit more about it recently too. They don't really know who basically, turned her in. There's always been rumors on who did,
Wasn't there
how
a
this
phone call?
came
I
and
think it
stuff
was
like
like
that. Well, there's
wasn't
been
there a
rumors there was
phone
a
call?
phone call that it was a burglar, but a lot of some of the newer ones now are saying that it might have been one of the business partners of Otto Frank,
Hmm.
the father. That like because he used to always ask where the family was and stuff like that, and look over at the bookcase. Some other ones said some of the people that were helping them bring them food might have got captured by the Nazis and kind of helped out, but there are plenty of theories. Ehlers, a friend of Otto Frank from several years before the war, they went to hiding. They talk about that he came forward saying that his father was the one that betrayed the family. Who knows, right? And one is that
Yeah.
if you watch the movie or read the diary, they talk about like a burglar broken in, that maybe the burglar got caught by the Nazis at some other point and said, "Listen, I heard footsteps coming from behind this annex in this house there. Let me go. It could be people in there and stuff like that." Some talk about a possible someone named of Lena Hartog von Bladden, which is actually the cleaning lady and wife of one of the warehouse employees, and she testified knowing that there were Jewish people hidden in some of her employer's property. So they're
Hmm.
saying that maybe she could have been the one to do it. So, but no one really knows who betrayed her,
Yeah,
basically,
betrayed her.
who told them that they were hiding there, because the Nazis were not going to find them if not that. And it's that whole story is obviously heartbreaking, just as a whole, not just with the Anne Frank story,
Yeah,
but that they were so close to the end of the war. Like she writes about D-Day in her diary,
nuts.
and she dies shortly
Yeah.
afterwards at Auschwitz. Shortly after that, like her father
See,
and
we
one that
read that
survived in the
in
war.
middle school. I mean, my son is finishing 8th grade, and they never read that. Did you guys read it in middle school? I thought it was in middle school,
Yeah,
read,
I believe middle school, high school. I definitely remember it. Yeah, well, it's different now when they teach it.
but
I know they definitely cover in high school. The standards, we're talking about New Jersey now. The
maybe they
standards
shifted.
change when they
Yeah,
talk about that stuff, so they shifted a little bit more
yeah,
towards high school. I think they will talk about it. Is you have to mention the Holocaust at some point every year, right? It's part of the mandate, but
yep,
they're also will focus on it a bit with genocides,
yep.
which is part of
As a
the
whole, yep,
in high school mandate. Yeah.
yep. All right. Well, as we mentioned before, again, this is just like a nice dipping your toes into the topic, as we usually do. But if anyone is interested in more of these eerie or unsolved mysteries of World War II, there really are plenty. And
Oh yeah,
for all of
there's a whole
you,
bunch that we never talk about. So don't get
yeah,
mad if we didn't talk about one that you knew, because
exactly.
obviously we can't talk about all of them. I still have papers and papers and papers of ones that we didn't talk about, but
So
can't be going
it's
on
a
forever.
yeah, this is a good introduction. So to everybody out there that listens to our podcast, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in every week. It's awesome. And if you want to contact us in any way, shape, or form, you can find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. We are always here to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you guys next week.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.